We have some more NHL signings to discuss today, including a big RFA for the Dallas Stars' Roope Hintz. We have a couple more players from the 2020 NHL Draft class that have signed, and we also might be getting some significant updates as early as this week for the NHL Return for the 2021 NHL season. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some signings to discuss today, as well as some news potentially here on the NHL's next return for next season. So let's jump in here first with the signings. We have the Dallas Stars announcing today that they've come to terms with restricted free agent forward Roope Hintz on a 3-year contract at $3.15 average annual value, $1 million that is, per season. So obviously that's another pretty good signing here by Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars, who I think have taken care of business quite nicely this offseason, getting all of their RFAs looked after. Of course, we've seen them do some other deals here for some pretty significant players too. And of course, Roope Hintz is the final piece here of their off-season business. So they're bringing back majority of next season. They get Anton Khudobin re-signed. They get all their RFAs re-signed. The only piece they haven't brought back is Corey Perry. And right now they're a little tight on cap space to really consider doing that. But that really wouldn't take a lot of moves to free up a little bit of extra space to get him back too. So I wouldn't completely rule it out, although Corey Perry at this point has been linked to talking to some of the Canadian teams like Montreal and Ottawa. So we'll see what his future holds. But I must say I'm pretty impressed with Jim Nill and his staff and the offseason that they've had, taking care of all their contracts, squeezing everybody in under the cap. Obviously, we saw them have a terrific run to the Stanley Cup final, and they're going to have an opportunity here to come back with pretty much the same roster. So hopefully they can continue to have a lot of success and be a team that can contend here for a while. So, I mean, they've had some pretty solid players and guys like Ben and Seguin for a long time, and now they have the supporting cast to go a little deeper here and have a shot here at some Western Conference championships and Stanley Cup championships. So we'll see how they do here after having their long run to the Stanley Cup finals. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have a couple more members of the 2020 NHL Draft class sign their entry-level contracts, including first-round selection of the Winnipeg Jets, Cole Perfetti, who signs his 3-year ELC. Of course, the average annual value for cap purposes is $925,000, but he'll have the opportunity over the 3 years to earn approximately a little bit more than $2 million in performance bonuses, depending on how he plays and how much he plays and how he performs stat-wise. So a great contract signing for Winnipeg and Kevin Cheveldayoff. Obviously, a lot of these top players are now getting their ELCs in place. I would think Perfetti probably goes back and plays a year of junior before he cracks the NHL. I mean, he is a player who I think has a lot of great attributes that will lead to success at the NHL, but there is a few things I think he needs to work on as well before I think we can truly say he's NHL ready. But Perfetti he's a shot-first center iceman, an incredibly wicked smart player, one of the brighter hockey minds in this draft class, and I think he's exactly the kind of player that the Winnipeg Jets were looking for, to have that longer-term release solution for that number 2 center to play behind Mark Scheifele, which will be a great boost for the organization. So great signing there by the Winnipeg Jets. Now, we also had our first second-round selection sign an entry-level contract, and all the first-rounders haven't even got their contracts as of yet, but the Predators have signed second-round pick, 42nd overall, Luke Evangelista, who was playing in the Ontario Hockey League with the London Knights program. He was a point-per-game player, pretty much 61 points in 62 games last year. Of course, the London Knights program has put out a lot of great talent over the years. The Hunter brothers have done a phenomenal job with finding lots of talent and helping develop them to getting NHL opportunities. So one of the top junior programs who's put out probably more NHL players than just about any other franchise. I'd have to fact check that, but I know just going by memory here, it seems like they're putting out more players than just about anybody. And obviously that's great to see a second round pick get signed so quickly after the draft without even playing another junior game or going to a training camp or anything of that nature. It's not something you see very often, to see a player, even though he's not really a late pick, to see him drafted where he was and they get signed without playing another hockey game, just not something that's very common. So obviously he's a player that the Predators are quite high on. So we'll see what the next season holds for him. I'm sure he'll go back to London and still continue playing and hopefully have a dominant season for the Knights. We also had some additional news in the coaching department with the Florida Panthers announcing that they've hired a new assistant coach bring in veteran, former defenseman and great longtime coach Ulf Samuelson, who's been really, like I said, he had a long career as a player. He's been coaching for around, I think, 15 or 16 years now with a variety of teams. I know he's coached the Rangers. He's been coaching with the Coyotes. He's coached as a head coach at the American Hockey League level before, coached in Sweden a little bit, and I know he's also coached in Chicago, which is where, obviously, he's worked with Coach Q before. So Joe Quenneville brings in one of his old assistants from the Blackhawks days, Ulf Samuelson here, of course, like a solid guy who can bring in a ton of experience as well. And I'm sure that many of these NHL coaches like to bring in their own guys that they've used to working with, and they know what they can expect from. So the Panthers add Ulf Samuelson here to their coaching staff. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have reports that we could be getting a pretty significant update from the NHL as early as this week, likely on Thursday. Now, Bruce Garriak of the Ottawa Sun is reporting that there is an NHL conference call between Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, and the owners on Thursday. Now, they have regular conference calls, but they're normally every second week on Monday. So this one seems to be like an extra meeting with some potential news coming from it. I mean, we may not get anything firm, but still, they're expected to be discussing a lot of the different scenarios here. So essentially, it sounds to me like during this meeting, we're going to get Gary Bettman and Bill Daly giving a whole bunch of different scenarios from them to the ownership groups to outline what the season could possibly look like. We've heard talks that it could have, the all-Canadian division, for example, because of the border closure. Maybe they end up putting teams in as many as like 4 divisional hubs, for example, where the teams can kind of rotate through. They go in, they play for a couple of weeks, then they're home for a week. So they're kind of gone for 2, home for 1, and they rotate through that way. So that way, because that they're not going to agree to a bubble where they're in a bubble for an extended time like they were in the playoffs and go without seeing their family for that long. That's not going to happen again. That was just too hard and too expensive as well from the league's perspective. So obviously, I think this kind of concept does make sense. You can have all the Canadian teams play in Canada so that they don't have to travel across the border, have the 3 other divisions, make them all regionally based, and kind of have them rotate through. Now, they may not finish the same way that they started. As I mentioned before, the divisions could end up getting realigned partway through the season as things change, as things get opened up, hopefully, as we get a vaccine, hopefully, as things, kind of slowly go back to what we used to call normal, the optimism here that the league could start having more fans in attendance and kind of go back to the old way of doing things. Now, obviously, owners don't want to really go the entire season without fans because 45% of league revenues come from ticket sales, and to have another substantial period of time without that would just be a massive blow, and some of these weaker teams that are not as profitable could really be hurt financially, which could be really bad for a long-term outlook. I hate to say it, but it could even potentially lead to a relocation or teams being sold. You just never know. It really would depend on how long things were drawn out here and how much impact there was. But with some teams that it wouldn't take as much as others, so there could be that slim possibility. Now, of course, as I mentioned, you could also have a variety number of games for the season. They still would like to get 82 games in, but there is scenarios where they could maybe play like a 72, a 60, 48, 56. There's a variety of different schedules out there, and that the league is going to want to get as many in there as possible, and obviously as many fans as possible, and that's all going to be dependent too on each the individual NHL city and jurisdiction and what they're allowed to do at that particular location. So it would not necessarily be a fair deal across the board for what each team would get for ticket sales, because it would just depend on what they're allowed to do in their home area. So either way, there's a lot of details to be worked out. We may not get anything firm, obviously, because whatever they talk about and whatever they decide they'd like to do, they still have to talk to the NHL player committee that's designed to work with the ownership group in the league on a return to play, and obviously they're going to have to vote on things, get more details for the players and all that. So it's going to be a little bit before they get anything finalized, but we've seen that the NBA has agreed to come back for December 22nd to play through their holiday season, which obviously is a big revenue generator for them, and I know this is certainly putting some pressure on the NHL to get things figured out, because they don't want to be losing out here seeing one of their competitor leagues taking advantage and start getting some dollars flowing back through their teams and their ownerships and across the league here. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, if all goes well, we'll have a more significant update on the NHL's return on Thursday. So let me know your thoughts on the return, what it could look like, as well as the contracts we discussed today, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.